in the bitter winter of 1914, as the world seemed to crumble under the weight of a war that no one believed would last so long, young soldiers on both sides of the Western Front found themselves swallowed by mud fear and the endlessly echoing thunder of artillery. They longed for something that felt impossible to imagine amid such devastation. And it was during that cold December that a moment so extraordinary and deeply human unfolded. It would be remembered long after the last guns of the Great War had fallen silent. In the frost-covered trenches, British and German soldiers shivered beneath thin coats, their breath turning to mist as they clutched photographs of families waiting across oceans and fields, far beyond the reach of war. Each man wondered if he would ever again smell the scent of home or hear the voices he loved most. As Christmas approached, the feeling of sorrow grew heavier. For many of these soldiers, this was the first Christmas away from home, and they feared it might also be their last. On Christmas Eve, the sky hung like a dark curtain over a world that had forgotten laughter. Beneath that sky, British troops sat in their trenches, listening to the distant crackling of gunfire that had become as familiar as breathing, when suddenly something far softer drifted through the icy air. A sound so gentle it startled them. For a moment, they thought their minds were playing tricks, but then they heard it again, unmistakably clear. A German voice singing a Christmas carol, a song so tender it cut straight through the cold, heavy silence of the battlefield. The British soldiers looked at each other with expressions that mixed confusion and disbelief. No one expected music here, not in a place where death had become a daily visitor. Gradually, more German voices joined, until the melody of Silent Night rose softly, like a fragile ribbon of warmth stretching across the no man's land that separated enemies. Moments before, they had been nothing more than shapes to aim at. Yet now, they sounded painfully human. Without knowing why or how to respond, one British soldier began to sing back, his voice trembling not just from the cold, but from something deeper. Soon, others joined him, until two languages wove together into a single, shared prayer, rising into the dark sky above trenches carved into frozen earth. When the last note faded, the silence that returned was unlike any silence they had known before. Not threatening, not empty, but filled with awe and hesitancy, as if the world itself wondered what would happen next. Then, from the German side, a flicker of light emerged, a candle perched on a small Christmas tree that a soldier had managed to save or fashion from scraps. Moments later, more candles glowed faintly across the trench line, small, warm flickers that pierced through the darkness like stars fallen to earth. The British soldiers stared, mesmerized, as voices called across the field friendly greetings spoken in broken English, words simple, yet powerful enough to thaw the ice that war had formed around their hearts. When one German soldier climbed slowly from his trench, hands raised to show he carried no weapon, the British troops tensed, unsure whether this was courage or madness. But then, one British soldier rose to meet him, stepping into the deadly open space that for months had been a graveyard for countless men. They walked toward each other across the frozen battlefield until they finally stood face to face and exchanged a handshake that seemed to reverberate across history. In that brief, courageous moment, they proved that humanity could still exist, even in a place designed to crush it. More soldiers from both sides followed, hesitant at first, then with growing confidence, until the once feared stretch of land between their lines became a meeting ground instead of a killing field. For the first time since the war began, British and German soldiers looked into each other's eyes and saw not enemies, but weary young men just like themselves. Boys who missed their mothers, their wives, their children, their sweethearts. Boys who had been told to hate each other, but discovered in that moonlit moment that hatred could crumble faster than frost beneath a candle flame. They exchanged small gifts, cigarettes, chocolate, buttons, scarves, pieces of bread, precious tokens in a world that had so little left to give. Some shared photographs, showing the faces of newborns they had never held, or parents they feared they might never see again. Laughter began to rise gently across the frozen air, a sound so rare on the front that many of them felt their eyes burn at the sheer grace of it. Tears that had been locked away by months of fear now fell freely onto the cold ground. In the midst of this impossible peace, someone produced a football. Soon, soldiers from both sides found themselves kicking it across the dirt, the echoes of their joyful shouts bouncing off the ruined earth, as if the battlefield itself were waking from a nightmare. For that brief, wondrous time, the war truly stopped. Not because generals ordered it, not because governments negotiated, but because ordinary men chose to listen to the humanity still beating deep within them. As the moon shone down on British and German soldiers playing like children, the world seemed to stand still and watch, unable to comprehend how such light could exist in such darkness. Though they knew the High Command would never approve of such a truce, they clung to those hours with desperate gratitude because they were living something pure enough to remind them that even the worst of humanity could not extinguish the best. When dawn came, the soldiers lingered, reluctant to return to their trenches, their cannons, and their commands. They shook hands again, solemnly embraced, and there were men who whispered prayers for the safety of the very people they had been ordered to kill. Slowly, they walked back to their own sides, their boots heavy not from the mud, but from the heartbreak of knowing that the peace they had created would not last. The world was not yet ready for such a miracle. Soon, the officers demanded a return to battle. The guns roared again, and the cruel rhythm of war resumed. But something inside the soldiers had forever changed. After seeing their so-called enemies laugh, sing, share food, and speak of home, they could no longer fully believe the lies that war had fed them. Many would later write that the hardest shots they ever fired were the ones that followed that sacred Christmas, because every bullet felt like an act against their own hearts. Years later, after the war ended, after the trenches were swallowed by grass and sorrow, many of those who survived spoke about that night. The night the war stopped, not because of treaties or victories, but because human beings remembered that they were still brothers. Even when surrounded by barbed wire and blood, they spoke of how some of them kept the small gifts exchanged that night until their final days: a German belt buckle, a British cap badge, a chocolate wrapper preserved in a tin S. Reminders that even in humanity's darkest moments, kindness can break through like dawn through storm clouds. They told their children and grandchildren about the night when enemies shared songs rather than bullets, when laughter echoed where cries of agony had once filled the air, when hope flickered like a candle in the cold and refused to be extinguished. Even though the truce did not end the war, it planted a seed in the hearts of generations, a seed that said peace is always possible, even where it seems impossible, because peace is not created by nations, but by people willing to see each other as human. And every Christmas since that winter of 1914. When historians retell the story, when descendants of those soldiers whisper the memories passed down through their families, the world pauses for a moment. We pause to honor the miracle that happened when ordinary soldiers chose compassion over hatred, love over violence, and courage over blind obedience. They proved that even amid the frozen ruins of war, humanity can rise like a warm light against the cold. They showed us that the greatest power we possess is not the force of our weapons, but the gentleness of our hearts. As long as that memory lives, the Christmas truce remains a testament to what the world could be if people listened more to the music of compassion and less to the drums of war. It is a reminder that even in the deepest night, a single song can spark a miracle across a battlefield and change history forever. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please consider sharing it so that the memory of this incredible moment of peace continues to inspire us all. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories that matter.